Hello everyone. This video is designed to help you with special ed lesson planning for edTPA. The first step in getting started is to choose one of the classes that you're working with if you have more than one class. And then you're going to choose one student in that class. And you need to get permission to video record and to use the student's work samples. So part of the choice of which student to use might be which parents will give you permission to work with their child. Then you're going to create 3 lesson plans. The learning goal for all 3 lesson plans needs to be the same because the lessons are going to build on each other in a learning sequence. You'll need to use the IEP goal to also decide, in other words, you need to connect your learning goal to something in the student's IEP. It can be academic or non-academic depending on what your students are working on. And then you're going to create measurable objectives. So these all need to be aligned. Their learning goal, the IEP goal, and the measurable objectives for the 3 lessons. You only need 1 objective per lesson. Let's review measurable objectives. The first step is to identify a specific learning goal that has an observable learning outcome. That means we have to be able to see it so that we can collect data on it. You cannot say the student will learn or understand or know because we can't see learning, we can't see understanding, we can't see knowing. Instead, we're going to infer that by behaviors. Second, state the conditions under which a learning outcome can be expected to occur. So include materials, texts, facilities, and in what time period. Be very specific. And then third, specify the criterion level, that is the degree of learning that will be expected under those conditions. So here's an example. Students will be able to identify 3 appropriate character traits of Fern in the first chapter of Charlotte's Web by writing the character traits in their writing journal during independent practice. So the specific learning goal is writing the character traits. The conditions are using the writing journal during independent practice. And then the criterion level is 3 appropriate character traits. So if they have 2 appropriate character traits, they don't meet the target. Or if they have 3 character traits, but they're not appropriate, they don't meet the target. So to meet the target, they have to have 3 and they have to be appropriate. Another example is given a set of items, students will be able to use their hand, head, or arm to point to or move items that are similar to a different area 3 out of 4 trials. So again, our specific goal is that students will be able to use their head, hand, or arm to point to or move items. The conditions is given a set of items, and the criterion level is 3 out of 4 trials. So that's how you write a measurable objective. Next, you're going to write what kind of baseline data you will collect for your learning goals. So you need to know what they're able to do before you begin each lesson. And then you're going to create an informal assessment or plan, I should say, throughout the lesson. So this can be anecdotal records, this can be observation, this could be a checklist. It's just informal assessment that you're going to do throughout the lesson so that you can adjust the lesson if it's not working well. And then the formal assessment is at the end, and that's exactly the same as your objective. So your formal assessment and your objective should be exactly the same. Next, you're going to plan your instructional strategies and learning tasks. You need to provide enough detail for someone else to carry out the lesson. You should start with an anticipatory set and a review. The anticipatory set is designed to get them hooked and interested in the lesson, and the review is a way of linking it to what they've done before. The review is very important. You're going to be scored on that in edTPA that you are building on what they already know. Next comes the modeling or the direct instruction, where you show them exactly how to do the activity. And then after that comes guided practice and feedback. This is when you're working with the student and you give them clear feedback. Again, you're going to be measured on the feedback that you give, so make sure that your feedback is both what they are doing well and what they need to improve on or do next. So again, there's guided practice and feedback. This can be one-on-one, obviously, or it could be in a group setting. And then finally is the independent practice, and this is your formal assessment. So at the end of the task, they should do whatever it was you said they were going to do in your objective. Note that edTPA wants to see that your plans include teaching towards generalization, maintenance, or self-directed use of knowledge and skills. And I want to note that it's teaching towards that. It doesn't mean that the candidate or that the student can actually do it in a self-directed way, but that you have planned for how they will get to be self-directed, or how they will generalize that skill or maintain that skill. So I've created a column in your lesson plan where you can put notes in there on how you're going to make sure that you are attending to that. You also need to integrate a communication skill. edTPA requires that all candidates have something related to academic language. So for special education, you are going to plan for an expressive or a receptive communication skill, and then you'll just describe how you're going to support the student in acquiring, maintaining, or generalizing that skill. Let's go over some examples. You could have communication skills that are linked to academic content. So for example, if they're demonstrating reading comprehension, they might be focused on vocabulary. Or if they're learning how to add coins of various denominations, they could be focused on their name and value, or explaining fractions, or composing a paragraph. That is if your students are able to access academic content. You could also focus on communication skills that are just used to participate in learning tasks, such as social communication skills, raising your hand, asking for assistance, or communication skills related to self-management. Those are all fine. You could focus on, for students who might have a communication impairment, you could focus on eye gaze, pushing a switch, using their PAX card, choosing symbols, right? So remember that this is specific for special ed, so they understand what it's like to have students that might be nonverbal. Next, you're going to describe what communication supports you're going to use in your lesson. So that just means how will you make sure that your students can actually access those communication skills or practice them in some way. So it could be modeling think alouds, using picture cards, using sentence frames, providing different options for expression. Here's more examples, prompting, reviewing the vocabulary, using graphic organizers, rehearsal, think alouds. All of those are possible communication supports. All of those that I just showed you are in the academic language guide for special education. You can find that on Blackboard in our course shell in the task 1 materials, and the link looks like that. It's called Communication Skills and Lesson Plans, and you can download that guide, the edTPA AL, that means academic language, special ed PDF, and it gives you all those examples that I just put into this PowerPoint and more. So definitely take a look at that, and feel free to use what's in that guide. That guide was made by edTPA, so you know that what's in there is okay. Next, you are going to list the modifications and accommodations that you might need to make for your learner. Obviously, use your IEP for guidance. At the beginning of your task 1, you're going to fill out a context for learning form. And that form will ask you what the IEPs are for your students and what modifications or accommodations they are entitled to. So just make sure that your lesson plans match what you put in your context for learning. And then instructional resources and materials is pretty obvious. Just describe your key materials. You don't have to describe everything. You don't have to say that there's going to be a pencil there. But if there's a pack or something, then definitely describe that. These will go into your lesson plan, but you can put more details into a separate file. One of the files you have to submit in task 1 is resources and materials. And they give you 5 pages per lesson so that you could give an example of a graphic organizer, for example, or you could give an example of sentence frames that you're using or something like that. Finally, make sure that you're sequencing the lesson plans, because you're going to have to write a commentary that explains how the lesson plans build on each other. So the plans must lead to a common learning goal. So the learning goal will be the same for each of those 3 lessons, and they should just be incremental. So you're going to build, each lesson will build on each other to be towards the end of the learning sequence. So that by the end, they've achieved something more than they started out with. And again, you're going to use baseline data and then final data to show that they're learning. That will be in task 3. Finally, read the handbook for task 1. This is a quick overview, but all of the specific details are found in the edTPA assessment handbook. Special ed, this is found in the first what is edTPA section. And I encourage you to download this handbook, print it out, and refer to it frequently. There's no magical knowledge that I have. It's just that I've read the handbook really carefully, and I have experience with people creating this. But the handbook is your ultimate guide as to what you need. And to be honest with you, you have to be responsible for what's in that handbook. Although I'm going to be checking your files, I can't check them with the carefulness that you can. So you've got to take responsibility for what's in the handbook, because in the end, you're going to be submitting your files to Pearson, and they are going to be scored nationally, not by me. Again, I'm guiding you, but they are going to be scored nationally according to the rubrics that are in the handbook. So that's the overview of special ed lesson planning. I hope this has been helpful.